Hello everybody, welcome to the SchoolBusGuru channel. My name is Antonio Perez and I am your SchoolBus Guru. In this video, I'm going to be discussing the components that have to be added to the pre-trip inspection. Specifically the California school bus driver pre-trip inspection. Keep in mind, for those of you that are already school bus drivers, you need to just do the same exact pre-trip that you have always done, except there are a couple components that you need to add to it. So really, when I looked at my pre-trip inspection, I was doing everything already and I only needed to add 8 different things. So you might need to add only 5 different things, 8 different things, 10 different things, whatever it is. Do not panic. Do not panic at all, because you're going to be doing the same exact pre-trip that you have always done. There's just a couple new things that you need to add. If you're a brand new person studying to become a school bus driver, well, you've already received all that information at the very beginning of your behind the wheel training, and now it's just time for you to study and learn everything about the vehicle. Learning everything about the vehicle is going to make you that much safer. It's going to make you a safer driver. It's going to get you proficient with everything that you need to know about that school bus. So before we get started, please hit like and subscribe. My plan is to make 50 videos in a year, maybe more, maybe less, but I'm going to be providing you with as much information as possible. Things that I know, things that I have learned over my 33-year career as a school bus driver, as well as a school bus driver instructor. Feel free to drop a comment down below, or feel free to send me an email to schoolbusguru@gmail.com. Hopefully this doesn't backfire on me and I get hundreds and thousands of emails that I can no longer respond to. But hey, I'm staying positive. Let's begin with the pre-trip inspection. I have some bonus information for you at the end of this little section. Shouldn't be that long, but you might actually enjoy it. So what are some new items to add to your pre-trip inspection? And I am basing this off of the California Department of Education pre-trip sample form that they released over a year ago, all right? So one of the first things that is mentioned in that paperwork is that as you are approaching the vehicle, you want to be looking to see that the vehicle is not leaning towards one side or another, which would obviously indicate a suspension issue, whether it could be a broken shock absorber, broken leaf springs. Okay, so if this is something that a regular renewal driver has always done, then that's not something that you need to add. It also mentions in that paperwork that you want to look for the steering gearbox as well as the steering linkage. It is possible, I have seen it on some school buses, that as you look at the front of the bus, maybe through the front bumper, there's a little hole there, you might be able to see the steering gearbox and the steering linkage. If that's where you want to inspect those components, then that is where you can do it. If it's too difficult for you to inspect it at that point, because maybe you have to get on your knees or you got to get too low to the ground, then maybe just wait till you get to exterior check 1 when you can check it on the side, and it should be easier. When it comes to the engine compartment, something else that was added to the engine compartment is you want to be able to point out to and identify the water pump, the air compressor, as well as the alternator. You need to let the California Highway Patrol know, is it gear driven or is it belt driven? When it comes to the water pump, it is gear driven or belt driven. On our vehicles, the water pump is belt driven. The air compressor, it is gear driven. The alternator, it is belt driven. Point to its location, but do not touch it. A couple other items. This is probably the bulk of the items that need to be added that are quite difficult. Difficult, I say, only because you cannot see them. So they are something that needs to be mentioned, something that the California Highway Patrol needs to hear, okay? So let's go through what is listed on the form, which I have put on the screen for you. Leaf springs, airbags, shock absorbers. Yes, I know in my pre-trip, I always mention leaf springs as well as airbags and shock absorbers. So to me, that's not something new. That's something I'm just going to continue to mention. U-bolts, that is new. Brake hoses, brake lines, brake chambers, not new to me. Slack adjuster, yeah, it's probably been a couple years since I mentioned the slack adjuster, as well as the push rod. Drums and linings, oh yes, definitely. We have never ever mentioned that before. So something that the California Highway Patrol needs to hear. So obviously we are going to mention that the drums and the linings are in good condition, or if the vehicle has rotors and pads, that the rotors and pads are secure and appear to be in good working condition. In the rear area of the bus, leaf springs, air mounts, maybe that's the same thing. Leaf springs, airbags, the mounting for the airbags, torque arm. Oh my goodness, what in the world is that? But I'm going to mention it. Torque arm, rear axle spacer, bud spacing. Ladies and gentlemen, ask your mechanic what in the world those things are, so they can show you underneath the bus. And the last few things to add to your pre-trip inspection are the frame, the chassis, the frame. Sometimes you can see it, or you can see it throughout the bus, the whole length of the bus. Sometimes you see more of it at the front of the bus. Sometimes you see it in the luggage compartments. Sometimes you see it in the engine compartment. Mention it at least one time, that the frame is in good condition. It's not bent or broken or appears to be cracking. Drive shaft guard, I've always mentioned. Exhaust system, same thing. Good condition and secure. If your vehicle has diesel exhaust fluid, make sure that you check that the cap is secure and not leaking. Ladies and gentlemen, that is everything that you need to add to your pre-trip inspection. It's not a lot. Like I said, for my pre-trip inspection, I'm doing the same exact pre-trip, but I had to add 8 different things. One of the things I did recently, I renewed my school bus certificate last year. I mentioned all the components in the front tire area, and then I mentioned components in the rear tire area, but I focus on different ones. I should have mentioned the same exact things that are here that are there as well. So I lost a couple points, but hey, I still passed, thankfully. So that is all for the components that need to be added to the pre-trip inspection. What I'd like to go on to now, as sort of as a bonus, is going to be to have a little discussion about the air brake test. Keep in mind that in the state of California, what are the minimum things that we need to be checking on our air brake inspection is we need to be doing our air governor cut-in test, air governor cut-out test, static test, applied test, lower pressure warning device test, parking brake test, and service brake test. That is the absolute minimum. We do not like to do the minimum here in the state of California. We want to do the best inspection, the best pre-trip inspection, the best brake inspection. The best brake inspection for us to do is the California Department of Education recommended dual air brake system brake inspection. So let me tell you what that entails. You're going to be doing your air governor cut-in test. You're going to be doing your air governor cut-out test, your static pressure loss test, applied pressure loss test, low air warning device test, something called emergency stopping system, or you can call it emergency braking system for the front tank and the rear tank, the parking brake test, the service brake test. Lower pressure warning device test, front and rear, emergency stopping system, front and rear tanks. The dual air brake system is something that you have to trust. It's a brake system that you have to trust. It is pretty awesome. I wish our cars had the dual air brake system, but unfortunately they do not. They still have brake fluid. I want you to be able to believe in yourself. When you are learning to become a school bus driver, you have to have that belief in yourself because everybody else believes in you. Not just the person teaching you, but your family, your kids, your future students that are going to be riding your bus. They're going to believe in you. They're going to trust in you. Learn as much as you can. about your school bus. Don't just learn to pass the CHP drive test or your drive test with DMV if you're watching this from another state. Don't just learn something to pass. Learn something to learn it, to be able to become a master at it, and to be safe in every situation that you encounter. So let me tell you something about the dual air brake system. The dual air brake system are two different air systems, one for the front brakes and one for the rear brakes. The front brakes is always called the secondary air system. The rear brakes is always called the primary air system. The driver will always use the service brake pedal to stop the bus in any situation, whether it's a normal situation, normal stopping situation, or in an emergency situation. What's an emergency situation? Well, an emergency situation is a brake failure in one tank or the other, or if you are beginning to lose air pressure from both tanks at the same time, not catastrophically, but nice and slow, you can still stop the bus by using the service brake pedal. So here's a couple things that I want to point out about the dual air brake system recommended by the California Department of Education. When you are doing your air brake inspection, whether you're doing it as a regular driver or whether you're doing it because you need to prepare yourself for the CHB pre-trip inspection and brake inspection test, some of the things that I want you to think about is you want to be able to say the following four things or three things. You want to know what is the name of the test. You have to tell the officer or the coordinator what is the name of the test. You want to tell them what is it checking for. You want to explain to them how you're going to do it. And then the fourth thing is going to be you're going to do it. If there's anything that you miss, that you do not mention, then that opens it up to the CHP officer or coordinator. They're going to ask you a question. That's what makes everybody nervous. They don't want to be asked a question because, oh my God, what is going to happen with their mind, right? They're going to go totally blank. So we don't want that to happen, so we might as well provide the California Highway Patrol, the officer or the coordinator, with the information that they need to hear, because it's going to let them know that you know everything about the brake system and that you are confident in your abilities to inspect both the bus as well as the brake system. So a lot of people call this first test, or these first two tests, cut in and cut out. In my opinion, and you know how I teach someone, is you want to tell them the whole name of the test. Air governor cut in test, air governor cut out test. That is what you're checking for. You are checking for the air governor. When does it cut in? You are checking for the air governor. When does it cut out? We know that the air governor cut in, minimum air governor cut in pressure is 85 psi, and the maximum air governor cut out pressure is 130 psi. You can start with either test. You can start with the air governor cut in, you can start with the air governor cut out. It just depends when you first turn on the bus, what is the needle doing? Wait the full 15 seconds at a minimum. That is what I recommend, at least 15 seconds. Wait at least 15 seconds. As you're waiting those 15 seconds, you are watching the air pressure gauges. Are they moving or are they not moving? If they are moving, you can begin with the air governor cut out test. If they are not moving, you can begin with the air governor cut in test. Do not say, I'm always going to start with the air governor cut in. Do not waste time by letting it build up and then doing the air governor cut in and then building up again. Or do not turn on the bus, pump it all the way down below 85 and then let it build up and say, that's my cut in, or I'm going to do my cut out first and then go back to the cut in. Okay? All you have to do is turn on the bus, watch the gauges for 15 seconds at least. Sometimes you can hear the air governor cut in, watch it for 15 seconds, see what the needles are doing. If they are rising, you will begin with the air governor cut out test. If they are not rising, you can begin with the air governor cut in test. That's all I wanted to share about that. But say the whole entire name, air governor cut in test. It's going to help you remember what you are checking for. You're checking the air governor. When does it tell the air compressor to start pumping air into the tanks. The next test, a lot of people call it the static test. I call it the static pressure loss test, because what are you checking for? You're checking for pressure loss, air pressure loss. You're checking for air loss. How much air loss? Not more than 2 psi in 1 minute. So I've told you the name. I'm doing my static pressure loss test. What is it checking for? I'm checking for air loss, not more than 2 psi in 1 minute. And where is it checking for? Checking for leaks from the air tanks and the lines to the air controls. Heck, it could also be the lines to the parking brake, the lines to the door, the lines to the brake pedal, leaks from the one-way check valve. It could be checking for that. How do you do it? All you have to do is shut off the engine, wait 1 minute, cannot lose more than the 2 psi. At the end of the 1 minute, you're going to tell the CHP officer or the coordinator that you have passed the test, because you have passed the test. The buses never fail on the brake test most of the time. Next test, applied pressure loss test. Again, that is the name of the test, applied pressure loss test. What is it checking for? Checking for leaks, maximum 3 psi in 1 minute from the service brake lines or all 6 brake chambers. All 6 brake chambers, well, 4 service brake chambers and 2 spring brake chambers. Can also be checking for leaks from the two-way check valve or from the parking brake, as well as some of the other components. A bit further down in a few minutes, I'm going to show you a brake board diagram or a brake diagram, where I'm going to kind of explain to you, here are some of the components that you could be checking for leaks from on the static test, as well as on the applied test. Where would you be checking for leaks from? Lower pressure warning device test. We know that the lower pressure warning devices must activate by 60 psi and above, and they must be audible and visible. Once you figure out, or once you determine where does the lower pressure warning device activate for the front tank, you're going to continue to drain the air pressure all the way down to 0. Once it gets down to 0, you are now doing the next test, which is called emergency stopping system. To do that test, you have to start the bus, put the bus into drive, release the parking brake, let the bus move, and the bus must be able to move and stop with the service brake pedal. Only the rear brakes will be applied when applying the service brake pedal. You're going to set the parking brake, you're going to shift back to neutral, and now you're going to rebuild your air pressure to at least 100 psi, and you're going to do the lower pressure warning device test for the rear tank. So the same thing, once you have enough air pressure, shut off the engine, turn the key back to the on position, you're going to do the low air pressure warning device test for the rear tank. Must activate by 60 psi or above, must be audible and visible. Once you determine at what pressure it has acted or they have activated, you're going to continue to drain the air pressure all the way down to 0. Once it gets down to 0, you're going to do the emergency stopping system test, the same way that you just did it a few moments ago. Turn on the bus, shift to drive, push in the parking brake, let it move. The bus must be able to move and stop with the service brake pedal. The service brake pedal, if you were to be asked, what is the emergency stopping system? You're going to say it's the service brake pedal. Both the front and the rear brakes will be applied when you apply the service brake pedal in this situation where there's no air in your rear tank. The rear brakes will be applied by modulated release of air from the spring brake chamber. The parking brake test. All right, you just finished emergency stopping system. You reset the parking brake, shift to neutral, rebuild the air pressure up to at least 100 psi, or to cut out if you would like. You are now going to, once it gets up to cut out or more than 100 psi, you are now going to be doing the parking brake test. You're going to be checking to see that the parking brake works. The bus must be able to stop when you apply the parking brake. The bus must not also pull to one side or another. The way that you're going to do that is you are going to shift to drive. Once you have enough air pressure, push in the parking brake, Put on your seatbelt, make sure the door is closed, do your 5-count mirror check, look everywhere, let the bus move, I'd say 3 to 5 feet, 3 to 5 miles per hour, and you're gonna stop by pulling out the parking brake. The bus should stop. You definitely should not feel it pull to one side or another. Service brake test is the last test. Checking to see that the service brakes work. You'll do at least 2 stops prior to leaving your yard or the CHP testing area. The bus must stop after you apply the service brake pedal. I make a gentle stop. And as well as the bus must not pull towards one side or another. One of the things that your state certified instructor or your delegated behind the wheel trainer has most likely already done, they've already communicated with the California Highway Patrol officer or the coordinator, and they've asked questions about what specifically are they looking for. Most likely, everything that I've mentioned is things that the California Highway Patrol officer coordinator is looking for. If there are any other items that they would like for each person to inspect, then that is something that you need to add. Let's work with the California Highway Patrol. Let's not make enemies with them. My next slide, which is almost to the very end, is this breakboard diagram that I was discussing a few moments ago. If you don't have this breakboard diagram, or if your instructor doesn't have it, they can always reach out to CDE, or I'm going to attempt to put a link somewhere in the comments section below, so that I'll put this in a Google Drive, and that way you can just go and download it yourself. But one of the things that you can think of whenever you get asked, okay, what is the static pressure loss test checking for? That area that is highlighted is below the service brake pedal. All of those components below the service brake pedal is where you're checking for leaks from when you do the static pressure loss test. You can say I'm checking for leaks from the air compressor, air governor, air dryer, one-way check valves, the wet tank, the primary tank, the secondary tank. Heck, you might even be able to get away with saying as well as the two-way check valve, because in this diagram, it is below the service brake pedal. What do you check for when you are doing your applied pressure loss test? Well, you're checking from the service brake pedal and above. What does that include? Parking brake valve, spring brake control valve, the relay valves, the service brake lines, the four service brake chambers, as well as the spring brake chambers. As a review, on your air brake test, it is best to use the complete name of every single brake inspection test. Air governor cut-in test, air governor cut-out test, static pressure loss test, applied pressure loss test, low air warning devices test, front and rear, emergency stopping system, parking brake test, and service brake test. My name is Antonio. I'm your school bus guru. Hit like and subscribe. Leave any comments that you would like. Send me an email if you would like. And that is the end of this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I look forward to creating more content for you. Thank you.